Learning a foreign language can be challenging at any age, but it's not impossible. I know for me personally, I've been trying to learn Spanish for most of my adult life. And now that I'm thinking about potentially retiring in a country where Spanish is the national language, perfecting my Spanish skills has become more important than ever. So if you're like me and you're thinking about retiring in another country where English is not the national language, or maybe you've just always wanted to learn Spanish or some other foreign language, this video is for you. And one of the main ways that I found to be super effective is actually through study abroad. And it's not just for college age students anymore. If you've been following my channel, then you know that last year I spent some time in a Spanish immersion program in Costa Rica. So in today's video, we are going to talk about some of the top Spanish language learning programs in some of the top retirement destinations, including Costa Rica, Panama, and Mexico. I'll explain the differences between the types of programs offered at a university versus a language institute. We will also talk about some of the benefits of these programs that go beyond just learning the local language. I'll also share with you some criteria that you can use to help hopefully determine which program makes the most sense for you. So let's get started. Welcome back to Almost Retired Abroad. If you're new here, I'm Kimberly, and on this channel, we talk about living, traveling, and working abroad. And knowing the local language is one of the top ways in order to better connect with your new community if you're thinking about living in another country. So I'll share with you a little bit about my experience studying abroad. So I decided to study abroad at Intercultura in Costa Rica. They have two campuses. One is located in Heredia City, which is in the Central Valley. The other one is in Samara, which is on the beach. So you kind of have the option of either or. And some students that were in my program actually did, a few weeks at one campus and then a few weeks at another. It was pretty flexible. So one of the reasons why I selected Intercultura was because it is a language institute, and a language institute offers a lot more flexibility than studying at a university. So typically you'll find at a university that it's a little bit more structured and regimented. So they usually will go on the academic calendar of the university. So maybe like classes start each semester. And maybe there's only one, two, or three times a year that you can actually join a language learning program. And of course, if you're going to do that, then you're also going to have to make sure you meet all the qualifications for a student visa. And now there are a lot of places where there is not an age restriction on student visas. In fact, I did a video not too long ago, which I will link down in the description, where I shared an article from Kiplinger called Student Visas, Older Americans' Ticket to Living in Europe. The article talked about people that move to places like Spain, Italy, and France on a student visa. If you're not ready to commit to that level of paperwork and being gone for that long, a semester is a long time, then you might want to consider a language institute. And that's honestly why I chose a language institute over a university program, because it allowed a lot more flexibility. So typically, language learning institutes have multiple start dates. Usually classes will start every Monday, and then you have the opportunity to study for as short or as long of a period of time as you'd like, whether that's just a week or two, or it could be several months. Again, if you're going to be staying beyond a certain period, you'll want to double check and find out how long you can do that on a tourist visa. It's different for each country. So that's something that you'll want to find out when you're looking into the school that you're going to go to. But generally, language institutes are a lot more flexible. So I chose Intercultura because they did have group Spanish lessons. And at the time that I booked mine, they had a special running where you could take group Spanish classes, and then you also got 1 hour per week of private lessons. So this allowed me to both interact with other students in the class, and also allowed me the opportunity to get personalized lessons, so I could either go over some things that I had questions about from the weekly program, or I could work on specific things that I felt I needed help with. And they also had the opportunity to do either a homestay or to stay in their student apartments that were directly across the street. And so for me personally, I wanted to make sure I could stay in a place that was close to the school, but I really wasn't looking for like a hotel or an Airbnb. I wanted a little bit more authentic experience. And so that's why I ended up choosing Intercultura, and I chose to stay in the student apartments. Several of the students that I went to school with actually did do the homestay. And by the way, it was students of all ages. I would say the youngest student that we had there was probably about 20 years old, and the oldest were in their 70s, their 60s and 70s. And many of the older students actually were doing homestays with local families. So don't think that that's weird or like you're too old to do that. That is absolutely not the case. When you go to a language institute, you really have a lot more opportunity to customize the program. So for example, there were some students that I met while I was there that did exactly that. So there was one lady who owned a property management company. She worked a lot with construction workers and building tradesmen, and she was having difficulty communicating with them on the job site. So for her private lessons, her teacher actually took her to a hardware store and they went over some of the different names for some of the different tools in Spanish. And they talked about some common scenarios that she might face on the job site. And then they gave her some different phrases and things that she could use to better communicate to the workers. We had another student who was in her mid-20s. She was pre-med. She was getting ready to start medical school, but she wanted to learn Spanish for medical purposes. So they sat down with her and went through a lot of different scenarios related to patient care. So you really have a lot more flexibility if you decide to select a language learning institute over a college or university. I will say though that whether you go the university route or the institute route, you will still be able to learn the key things as it relates to reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Those are all super important for improving your overall fluency in the language. One of the things I also really appreciated about the Language Learning Institute is that they really worked hard to insert cultural activities into the curriculum. Some of the things we did at Intercultura included we had weekly cooking classes, we had Latin dancing classes, we had weekly excursions where we could go visit different areas, different nearby cities and towns, as well as different like museums and other historic sites, so we could learn more about the culture. We also got the opportunity to navigate taking public transportation. We went to different restaurants. We learned how to order in the language and just the typical day-to-day things that you would be doing if you were living in that country. And that's one of the things that I think is so important. So, if you're somebody who's watching this video and maybe you've already relocated somewhere and you're really struggling with the language or you're struggling to connect with the locals, I would highly recommend looking and seeing what language institutes are in your area that you might be able to take some classes at. Because while just taking one-on-one lessons with somebody, through one of the language learning apps or just, like a tutor that is okay. But the Language Learning Institute really helps you to understand more about navigating day-to-day life in the country that you've chosen. And they also can really help you understand some of the local slang and some of the nuances, some of the cultural nuances that it might take you a while to figure out on your own. And the great thing is it's a safe environment. So there's no stupid questions, right? So I would much rather personally embarrass myself by asking something silly in class than to humiliate myself in a public situation where the stakes are much higher. So that's the reason why I personally chose a language institute. And I think for like a lot of people, it's very flexible because especially like if you haven't moved yet and maybe you could do scouting trips in a few different countries that you're interested in and combine your vacation with language learning. So you really get a feel for the culture and how to communicate in that different country. If you're finding value in this video, please consider giving it a like. It helps YouTube to recommend it to other viewers just like you who are also looking for information about living, traveling, and working abroad. Thanks, now back to the video. So how do you determine what is a top-rated Spanish language or any language learning program? So for me personally, I ended up choosing Intercultura because I actually just Googled best places to learn Spanish outside of Spain. And I came across the fact that Intercultura has been consistently ranked as one of the top 7 Spanish language institutes in the world. And so that's why I chose them, and I'm glad that I did. But there's other criteria that you could look at also if you're thinking about learning Spanish specifically. So there actually is an accrediting body out of Spain called Instituto Cervantes or the Cervantes Institute, and they have Spanish language learning schools all over the world, even here in the United States, and on other continents that you would be surprised that they actually have accredited Spanish learning institutions. And so you have the option to study Spanish in a variety of settings. This is not an exhaustive list, but I'll share with you a list of some of the different Cervantes approved Spanish programs in some of the top retirement destinations, starting with Costa Rica. So I studied at Intercultura, and it is actually not on the Cervantes list, although I did find that the program really did work very well for me. If you're looking for a Cervantes approved program, you do have several options in a few different locations. So the first one is a school called CPI that's located in San Joaquin de Flores, which is actually not too far from where I studied in Heredia City. And they do have some options for a homestay or campus housing, so that's something to keep in mind. In the capital of San Jose, they have a school called Intensa. And then if you're thinking about staying closer to the beach, EF has a location in Tamarindo. They also do have student housing options available for that program. So another place I thought about taking Spanish lessons was in Panama, because if you've been watching my channel, then you know that Panama and Costa Rica are two of the places on my shorter list for places to retire. There's a few others, but those two are of a lot of interest to me. And in Panama, they have a couple Cervantes Institute approved programs. One of them is the Language Center inside the University of Panama. They have a school called EPA, Español in Panama. And there's another school that is actually not Cervantes approved, but it seems to be pretty popular and has some pretty good reviews online, called Casco Spanish School, located in the historic center of Casco Antiguo, that you might want to look into, especially if you're someone who maybe has already moved to Panama and you're struggling with the language. This school in particular works specifically with people for whom English is their first language, so they might really be able to help you adapt not only to the language, but to the local culture pretty quickly. The next location is in Mexico. So I actually did consider taking Spanish language lessons in Mexico, and they do have some highly ranked Cervantes accredited schools in Mexico. One of them is at the University of Guadalajara. Some of the other schools include Don Quixote, which actually is a chain of schools that has Spanish language learning throughout different parts of the world, but their location in Mexico is located in Playa del Carmen. And then International House, which is also a chain, they have two locations in Mexico. They have one in Mexico City and one in Riviera Maya. And the one school that I really thought about, it wasn't on the Cervantes list, but I thought about it because it's located in a beautiful location and it just looks like a really interesting school and it has great reviews. It's called Instituto Allende. This is a School of Art and Spanish located in San Miguel de Allende. And it just looks like a really cool place. It looks like it would be a fun place not only to study Spanish, but also just to enjoy the local culture. So those are just a few of the places that you could potentially consider learning Spanish if you're thinking about moving abroad. There are a lot of things to consider if you're thinking about a study abroad program. If you're specifically trying to learn Spanish, obviously you might want to look into whether or not you think that you need the accreditation from the Cervantes Institute, but also what are your language learning goals? Are you looking for a program that's more customized, or are you looking for something that's a little bit more regimented, like you'd find in a college or university? You know, what is your budget? What is your time frame? Are you looking to be just taking classes for a couple weeks or several months, or have you already moved or are planning to move and want to integrate that into your day-to-day after you've relocated to another country? These are all things to consider. I mean, I think it's just important to note that, like, if you are planning on living someplace long-term, knowing the local language is going to open so many doors for you, not just in your day-to-day life, you know, and doing things like going grocery shopping or calling customer service because you have questions about, you know, I don't know, your electric bill or things like that. Learning a language is going to really help you to make deeper connections with the local community. And so studying abroad is a great way to make that happen. I hope you found the information in this video helpful in helping you to make your decision. I will leave links to everything that I talked about down in the description, to the Cervantes Institute, as well as Intercultura, the school that I studied at. They do typically tend to offer discounts during the low season, where you can save some money on your program. So be sure to check that out. None of the links, by the way, are affiliate links. I'm just sharing this information because I think it's just so important, and I hope that you find it helpful. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.